Sometimes a sitcom gives you comedy, and sometimes it gives you a scene that completely changes the emotional direction of the entire show. And honestly, this episode of Friends does exactly that. What starts as a casual barbecue with jokes, sarcasm, and classic Chandler one-liners suddenly turns into one of the biggest emotional turning points in the series. Rachel realizing that Ross has been in love with her all along, and just when you think they're finally going to get together, boom! China happens, Julie happens, and heartbreak happens. Today, let's talk about why this entire sequence is one of the smartest, funniest, and most painful romantic setups in sitcom history. The scene begins in typical Friends fashion: chaos, jokes, and awkward energy. Ross is preparing to leave for China because of what he calls a whole big bone thing, which is such a perfectly Ross explanation. Nobody fully understands it, but somehow it makes complete sense because it's Ross. And then comes one of the funniest moments in the episode. Ross gives Monica a picture of himself and asks her to show it to Ben occasionally so the baby doesn't forget him. That joke perfectly captures Ross as a character. Lovable, intelligent, but hilariously dramatic. But beneath all the comedy, something important is happening emotionally. Ross wants to say goodbye to Rachel before leaving. That tiny detail matters. Even though he believes nothing will ever happen between them, he still wants to see her one last time. And then Chandler accidentally drops the biggest truth bomb in the series. This is where the episode becomes legendary. Rachel casually learns that Ross has been in love with her for years, and the brilliance of the writing is how natural the reveal feels. Nobody planned to expose Ross. It just slips out during conversation. That makes the moment feel real. Rachel's reaction is incredible because, for the first time, she begins replaying every interaction with Ross in her head. Suddenly, all those awkward moments, all those stares, all those weird emotional reactions finally make sense. And Jennifer Aniston plays this realization perfectly. You can literally see Rachel emotionally catching up with information the audience has known forever. And then the panic starts. Ross is leaving, right now, so Rachel decides to run to the airport. This is one of the most iconic sitcom chase sequences ever. And what makes it work is that Rachel herself doesn't fully know what she feels yet. She just knows she needs to see Ross. That uncertainty makes the scene more emotional. Because this isn't a polished movie confession, it's messy, confusing, human. Even Monica and Phoebe don't know if she should go. One says, "Maybe you shouldn't go if you're going to break his heart." And honestly, that's a very real concern. But Rachel says something extremely important. "I can't wait a week." That line tells us everything. For the first time in the series, Rachel realizes Ross actually matters to her emotionally. Then comes the airport disaster sequence, which is peak Friends comedy. She can't get through security. The airport staff misunderstands the message. Random passengers get interrupted. It's chaotic, awkward, and hilarious. And just when she's about to confess her feelings, Ross is already gone. And then the writers pull off one of the greatest emotional twists in sitcom history. Ross returns from China, but he's not alone. He brings Julie. Now this moment is brilliant for multiple reasons. First, Julie is actually nice. She's sweet, funny, intelligent. The show cleverly avoids making her a villain, because the real conflict isn't Julie. The conflict is timing. Rachel realized her feelings too late, and honestly, that makes the situation way more painful. The airport scene is heartbreaking because Rachel arrives emotionally ready. only to discover Ross has already moved on. And her physical reaction is classic sitcom comedy. The fake smiling, the emotional collapse, the random body cramps. It's one of Jennifer Aniston's funniest performances in the entire early series. What makes this arc special is that it feels emotionally realistic, despite being a sitcom. Ross spent years loving Rachel silently. Eventually, he convinced himself it would never happen. And the moment he finally lets go, Rachel falls for him. That's painfully relatable. The dialogue between Ross and Chandler later is also extremely important. Ross says there was always a voice in his head saying, "It's never going to happen." And then he jokes that the voice belonged to Chandler. That scene shows Ross emotionally choosing to move forward with his life instead of waiting forever. And that's why the situation hurts so much. Nobody is truly wrong here. Ross didn't betray Rachel. Rachel didn't intentionally reject Ross. They simply missed each other emotionally by a few days. This episode changed Friends forever. Before this, Ross and Rachel were just a possibility. After this, they became the emotional center of the show. And honestly, the writers handled it brilliantly. Comedy, romance, timing, heartbreak, everything works. And that final line about the silver lining perfectly summarizes the entire situation. Ross moved on without outside help, which somehow makes Rachel feel even worse. Classic Friends, funny, and devastating at the same time. Keep hunting and do like and subscribe for new videos.